So for most of the morning, we've just been loading up the lab with sterilized bags, and I'm just going to show you that real quick. So just load up the floor. The bags are still pretty hot. They've been cooling for about 24 hours in our sterilizer. They'll sit in the lab for another 24 hours, and we'll get in there tomorrow and inoculate those up. So things we're working on today, we're going to be doing jars of grain. So I boil our grain just in a pot, just to get it so that the water's hot and then it can steam off, and then we let the grain cool in these strainers and just evaporate most of the moisture off just from the grain losing the heat, and then those get jarred up and they get put in these pressure sterilizer units that we have here. So these units, we have 3 of them, and we'll fill those up with grain in jars, and they're just heating up right now. Get the water hot, and then we'll load those up. Other than that, with what we're working on today is we're going to be doing another batch of wood chips. So we just got that prepped. We'll be bagging that up this afternoon, and that's really all we're working on today. You know, every week we try to get about 800 to 1,000 bags of wood chips bagged up and sterilized and inoculated. That's about our capacity right now, and it really just depends if we're doing smaller bags for top fruiting or bigger bags for side fruiting, and that really just depends on the mushroom strain that we're growing. So we've already done one batch in our sterilizer for those jars, and this is batch 2. So you can see they're just venting out some steam. At this point I actually just close it's called a stopcock, and then these units will start to pressurize. And that usually takes about 40 minutes or so, and then they'll come up to 15 psi, and then at that point we're going to run these jars for an hour and a half. Ideally, honestly though, the jars only need 50 minutes, but I have the extra time, so I usually just make sure that they're sterile, and I go about an hour and a half. So I'll bring you in the lab and I'll show you what we're going to do with these jars. So I already have 42 jars sterilized right here. So that's one batch. We usually do 2 batches in a day for 84 jars if we can. So what we're going to do, hopefully tomorrow, is we're going to be sterilizing a couple different strains here. So I have a local strain called Pearl Oyster. This is strain 50. This is from Oliver. And then we have something called chestnut mushroom. The Latin for that is Foliota aptoposa. And we also have some piopino, which is called Agricide agriata. So for purpose of keeping everything organized, we label the strain in the Latin. So it's usually the first and last, or sorry, the first initial of the Latin name, and Latin names always have 2 names, usually the genus and then the specific mushroom strain. So like I said, this is Agricide agriata, so AA. and this just happens to be the 60-second strain that I've recorded in my culture bank. And then that's usually followed by the date of inoculation. And then for jars, I do have an example here. So again, we'll label the strain. So PO stands for Pleurotus austratus. This is our local strain from Oliver, strain 50. And then the date it was inoculated, this happens to be February 14th. And we always call these first generation. So this is our first generation transfer into grain jars. And then after this gets expanded into a grain bag, which we call a second generation. And then we usually stop the transfers at that point, and then the bag of grain will go into our final transfer into supplemented wood chips. And then for cultures, we just store everything in the fridge, and everything is in test tubes. And this strain is a shaggy mane strain. So CC is Coprinus comatus. This happens to be strain 12 in our library, and we record the generation that this strain has been transferred since it was either transferred from a clone, so from a wild tissue of a mushroom, or if it was created from spores or what have you. So this one I actually happened to create myself. So this is a local strain. I'd have to look into my notes to see exactly where this is from, because I do carry actually 3 local strains of shaggy manes from all over the Okanagan. But another example would be, let's see if I have an interesting one here. Well, this is Hypholoma sublaterium. This is otherwise known as cinnamon caps, and then you can see this is recorded as G4. And I've actually had this strain since 2012. I traded actually from Scott Henderson, who's known as the Mushroom Man out of Vancouver, and then he actually acquired this strain from Bill Chalmers. And you know, if you're careful, you can keep a strain alive for many years. So you know, I've kept the generation value of this down to G4. It was given to me actually at G2, and I've actually held on to this strain for about 4 years now. Finishing early is usually pretty rare on the farm, but when I have the opportunity, just check out this country. My farm's just right behind me, and I have this to enjoy. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember, we have an education opportunity called the Mentorship on our website at WTFmushrooms.com. We're accepting applications. We've already filled 4 spots, looking to fill another 4 spots, and I'm hoping I can hear from a few of you guys and hopefully inspire you to grow more mushrooms. All right, we'll talk to you soon.